Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You have tuned into the Rebel News Daily live stream on this, a Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host, well, let me tell you a little bit about my co-host. You know what, folks? Today is National Pink Day. She does not celebrate this day because pink, well, it's one vowel removed from Pinko, and she really hates those cats. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. Well, Sheila, you're looking wonderful in, it seems to be orange and black, certainly not pink. How you doing today?
You know, I think it's mustard. And thank you very much for noticing. I'm sort of struggling with my outfit today because I'm filling in for Ezra on his show today. And so I came down into my studio today and I had like a blue blazer on because I try to dress a little nicer when he lets me host for him. And then I realized his backdrop is completely blue. So I ran back upstairs and changed into yellow. And then my husband is like, you realize you're going to look like an IKEA, right? With the blue backdrop. So I'm going to have to change one more time. But this is good enough for now.
Well, wasn't Blue Blazer the name of a wrestler once upon a time?
Oh, maybe.
I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, all you WWF or WWE fans out there.
Oh, I'm sure it's way before then. Like everybody who knew who that guy was is dead.
Well, Sheila, we have so much to get to. The news never stops coming in, even though so many of the mainstream media seem to be mailing it in these days. And when they go out in the field, they're easy to identify. They're the only ones wearing masks, sometimes double masks. But they're not even following the science, which says that months ago the masks were removed. What are they so terrified about? I've actually spoken to some of them, and they said, Dave, if I could, I'd take it off. But if we're seen in public, they want us to wear masks. Well, for optic reasons, not for medical reasons. Like, again, more insanity on the COVID file, but I better not get too deep into that swamp because that's the whole YouTube censorious thug topic that they listen to very carefully. So why don't you tell the folks the ostensible policy reason of what we're actually trying to attempt to do here today, Sheila?
I will. And Efron and Olivia, just I'm going to send you a topic. I just want to touch on it lightly because, as you know, I think that Edmonton is a progressive hellscape. So I just like to talk about the latest stupid thing that they're doing. And I like to watch Edmonton like from afar. Like I'm so glad I don't live there, but I'm always worried that they're going to like encroach my way. And one day I'm going to wake up and Edmonton's on top of me. But I remain convinced that we should just District 9 it. Just build a fence and just leave it there. Evacuate everybody who wants to come out and just, leave everybody else behind. If you want to vote for the NDP, you want to vote for the Liberals, okay, great. Just do it in District 9. Yeah. Anyway.
And then to finish the District 9 comparison, Sheila, send in the likes of Elon Musk and all the other rocket ship makers to form some kind of a spaceship to remove the District 9 adherents back to their home planet, which is probably somewhere between Jupiter and Uranus. Anyway. I
thought you were going to say just launch cat food over the fence for them to eat, like that movie. Anyway, okay. This is the Rebel News Daily live stream. We're currently streaming on YouTube, but as David Menzies just alluded to, we might run up against some of their censorship laws. So if we talk about, the advice of a public health officer and we question it and we don't march along with the likes of Theresa Tam, who advised us to, if we're going to get busy, she said, wear a mask. Do you remember that? By the way, she just got a raise today, an extra 22% on her already inflated salary.
22%? But anyway, wait a minute. Whoa. COVID or no COVID?
We're getting the pandemic wrong.
Who gets that kind of a raise these days? 22%? I'm sure she's already making healthy six figures, right?
Oh, she's one. I think she is probably the highest paid bureaucrat, but she got 22%. I know Anthony Fauci is the highest paid bureaucrat in the American government.
Oh, yeah.
I think Dina Hinshaw is one of the highest paid bureaucrats in Alberta. Theresa Tam, her reward for getting the pandemic completely wrong from the very beginning gets a 22% pay raise. And I think might have a lot to do with that she knows where all the bodies are buried at this point.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know what? This being Pride Month, she's a champion of such language as pregnant people. This is a doctor. Pregnant people. And wow, you really fail upwards in this country, don't you? A 22% raise.
She should be fired. She should be fired. She's getting like a quarter tacked onto her salary. It's outrageous. But anyway,
fired. Some people think she should be in jail, but that better not go too deep in those. We're never
even going to find out the extent of the things she got wrong. But I should finish telling everybody what we're doing, because
thank you.
I went on the David Menzies style tangerine right there. So I should just bring it back in. So to alleviate the fact that we have to shut our mouths about certain things over on YouTube, we are currently streaming on Getter, but we're also on Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U. And the beauty of those four platforms is that they don't care about your politics. So let you say what you sincerely believe and let you speak your mind and let you talk about inconvenient facts. And on Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U, you can go one step further. You can engage with us here at Rebel News by leaving a paid chat. On Rumble, it's called a Rumble Rant. Odyssey, it's a Hyper Chat. And Super U, it's called a Super U Shout. Send us one of those. The producers will send it to us in a little chat, and we'll read it on the air, and we'll do our best to address whatever it is that you want to talk about. And it's a great way to support the work that we do, but also have your say, because unlike the mainstream media, we don't take money from Justin Trudeau, and we invite comments as opposed to turning off the comment section.
There you go. And I guess, Sheila, the number one story, and I addressed it.
No, let me talk about Edmonton. Let me talk about Edmonton,
yes.
Please.
Okay, then. What?
Because it's so stupid. And I was talking about this with my husband last night. Edmonton is run by hippies who don't realize that Edmonton is kind of a nature city. And so they did this same sort of stupid stuff last year when they were not going to, they weren't going to trap coyotes anymore that were within the city limits. They were just going to send people out to scare them. And so they sent these people out with literally jars of pennies and balls. And so they were going to, if they came across a coyote, they would shake the pennies to make noise to scare them, which is just training the coyote not to be scared of people. They realize you're not going to hurt them, right? Like if you do that, like they are canids, right? Like they learn the same way dogs do. It's the same reason we put out a hunting blind well in advance if we want to shoot coyotes, is because we want them to get used to the fact that the hunting blind is there and it's not unusual, so it doesn't spook them. But they send people out with pennies to shake the pennies, which just teaches them that loud noise in people over, a series of contacts that doesn't actually harm them. So then now they're not scared of people, which makes them aggressive. And secondarily, they were going to throw balls at them. I'm like, so you want to teach them how to play fetch? Good job, City of Edmonton. Great job.
Sheila, first question. Where do these hippies get the pennies from? The penny has been out of production for almost a decade in Canada. Who's got jars of pennies anymore? And
I'm fascinated that that's the point that you got hung up on there.
But are these hippies hoarding pennies from yesterday? But the thing is, you're right. By trying to kill them with kindness, they're actually achieving the opposite. They're making these predators more canny, more aware of what they can get away with. They are going to embolden these coyotes.
Yep.
And that's another thing I got hung up with. What's with this coyotes? It's coyote, as in Wile E. Coyote, who I've always said has an incredible lawsuit pending with the Acme company for all the crap merchandise he bought from them. But anyways, this is staggering. Is there anyone on staff, Sheila? Because this is, and I'm not being funny here, who is armed, because what if the coyotes don't get rattled by a jar of pennies shaking? What if they don't want to play fetch like Fido? And what if they encroach upon these hippies? Is there somebody there with, I don't know, a weapon? Because
Oh, I doubt it. I doubt it. And so this is, I'm surprised nobody's had to learn about coyote nature the hard way. But moving along to the next year, because Edmonton remains ridiculous.
Yeah.
This year, they are no longer spraying for mosquitoes. And they basically, so there's two ways to get rid of mosquitoes: spray, poison, and like mosquitoes are a thing in Alberta. Ralph Klein famously said Edmonton is a city with too many socialists and mosquitoes. He was an oracle because now we're dealing with socialists and mosquitoes. So anyway, mosquitoes seem to, okay. So sorry, I flipped you guys the wrong article. So it's mosquito season. It's terrible in Alberta. And we just had like days and days of rain. Also, the city of Edmonton has decided that they don't really need to cut the grass in the ditches and stuff like that. So overgrown, standing water, end of June. Oh, we're about to have one heck of a mosquito hatch. So what does the city of Edmonton do? Because they're run by hippies. We're looking to bats and better education in lieu of mosquito spraying. So the city managers are planning to install bat houses, expand monitoring of insect populations, and conduct more public education. The more I learn about mosquitoes, the less they're going to bite me. Is that what they're telling me here? But anyway, because they canceled the helicopter spraying program for mosquitoes. So this, and it's like $507,000 that they spent on aerial spraying. So pretty affordable, actually, considering that it's just barely $500,000, and the government will blow that on a piece of art that looks like garbage. So, but their new strategy is to rely on more natural control methods. I am happy for the hippies in Edmonton to figure out the hard way that this is what you get when you vote for Justin Trudeau's former natural resources minister as mayor, Amarjeet Sohi. And I just keep holding my breath for the day that nature reclaims Edmonton like Pripyat, the city that was right next door to Chernobyl, and then like nature just takes it back over. This is ridiculous. Congratulations on the next outbreak of West Nile, by the way.
They're relying on bats. How about this, Sheila? Why don't they hire a strong man, put him in a Batman costume, and instead of throwing batarangs at mosquitoes, he rattles a jar of pennies? If it works on the coyotes,
just tells them about citronella. Just go out there dressed in a bat costume and tell people about citronella, which hardly works at all. But go do that and see. Just see. And then the mosquitoes
Woodstock,
won't bite you.
You know. Yeah. And you know what, Sheila? I have to tell you, if this, I don't think this was a move of fiscal conservatism to save $500,000, because I'll tell you, it is a bargain at 10 times that amount to get rid of mosquitoes. These are vile, filthy creatures that are complete annoyances. I know there's some kind of master plan for every animal on the planet. I can't figure it out for mosquitoes, unless it's just to provide bats with extra stuff to eat.
Well, and here's the thing, just before we go on, when people say like a helicopter program, and I probably used the wrong language here when I said spraying, because it's really not. People think that you're just coming with a cloud of DDT, which also gets a bum rap, and you're just spraying everything. That's not what they do. What they do is these helicopters fly low. They drop corn cobs laden with this stuff called, like it's some sort of larvae side. Like it's a poison that kills the larva before it hatches. They come and drop these biodegradable corn cobs with this poison that only affects mosquito larva into the standing water, and then they fly away. And apparently this is just a little bit too much for the hippies in Edmonton.
Unbelievable. What are they trying to do? Turn Edmonton into, Winnipeg? I mean,
like I said, let nature take Edmonton back. I don't care.
Sheila, one last thing on this file.
I'll vote for the bats. Instead of Amarjeet Sohi. They seem a little bit more useful. I mean, they'll be more effective at doing their job, than Amarjeet Sohi is at being the mayor.
Well, I guess we're going to have what, a bat breeding program. I mean, how many bats are there in Edmonton anyways? I mean, what I'm saying, Sheila, are there enough bats to counteract the
Just
increase?
wait till all the bats are in everybody's attic and they're freaking out and there's bat guano everywhere and it's high ammonia and it's destroying their houses and they've got bats in the rafters and everybody's having a conniption. And it's because the city said, you know what we need? Bats, instead of just dropping these stupid corn cobs in standing water.
Incredible. You know, I can't figure out the city of Edmonton because I lived for 2 years in Alberta. That's where I started my journalism career, such as it is, out 2 hours northeast of Edmonton in St. Paul. And I always loved Alberta. I loved the folks I met there. It felt like the most American of all the 10 provinces.
Yeah.
This idea of loony lefty downtown Toronto types getting a hold of your biggest cities. And I'm going back to when I was there, it was 1985, 86. It would be something like out of a science fiction. Like, what happened? Did a lot of people from the East migrate to Alberta and went into politics, Sheila?
Everybody works for the government in Edmonton. It's the seat of government. So it's just nothing but bureaucrats and public sector workers, and it's where all the union offices are headed. So that all those politics sort of permeate the city politics. However, the federal Conservative Party is pretty strong, particularly in, like the more affluent suburbs and the more new development areas. So I don't get it. So there are some regions that vote Conservative provincially, they vote Conservative federally, and elect complete and total wackadoos municipally. I don't get it.
Well, I'll tell you, if the agenda of the wackadoos was to capture the Mosquito vote, they have surely succeeded. They've got it. Unbelievable.
Vermin.
Well, Sheila, the top story, or what should be the top story, regardless of how many media apologists are out there trying to spin this, is, of course, the allegations that RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, the former public safety minister Bill Blair, who, by the way, folks, doesn't live in the riding he represents in Toronto. He's in Forest Hill, which is very Tony and upscale. His riding is Scarborough, where, there's a lot of crime. So, he kind of detaches himself from that. And, of course, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself. I'm not going to weigh in too much on this, Sheila, because I discussed this vigorously with our colleague Catherine yesterday. But what we see going on here is an absolute scandal. And I mean, so what else is new? I think it's almost as though the Justin Trudeau Liberals get out of bed every day thinking, what kind of scandal can we do, and see how we can get away with it. And basically, folks, the nub of it was that there was an active investigation into the mass murder, into that massacre in 2020 in Nova Scotia. And Brenda Lucki was putting pressure on Superintendent Darren Campbell and the Director of Communications, Leah Scanlon, those are Mounties, to release information pertaining to the guns being used. And Campbell and Scanlon, to prove that there are good cops, they were resisting the demands of their superior, saying it's inappropriate. This is an active investigation. It could compromise the investigation. But at the end of the day, Sheila, I guess it comes down to Justin Trudeau, doesn't it? Because here is a massacre that he can, turn into a Liberal Party of Canada campaign ad, namely how bad guns are. That's where I weigh in. I think all three of these individuals should resign immediately. They won't, of course. In fact, they're denying the allegations and they're spinning the allegations. So what else is new? Sheila, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing here?
This is one of the most grotesque things, I think, in recent political history that I've ever seen Justin Trudeau do.
Yeah.
So he's standing on the graves
Yep.
of RCM and on the RCMP failure
Yep.
to do things during the worst mass casualty event in Canadian history, the worst mass shooting. And instead of saying, what did the RCMP get wrong here? Why was this guy even out? They didn't even consider that. They said, what a wonderful opportunity for us. Yeah. And Brenda Lucki, commissioner of the RCMP, said, you're darn right, boss. What a great opportunity for us. The Nova Scotia. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so never let a good crisis go to waste, in other words, Sheila?
Yeah. A Nova Scotia, I'm just reading from the National Post article on this, which is really damning. A Nova Scotia RCMP superintendent alleged that Lucki made a promise to the Prime Minister's office and then Public Safety Minister Bill Blair, who's the worst. He failed the city of Toronto, and they're like, you know what? You know that terrible job you did in Toronto? Do that for the rest of the country. And he did. Yep. Lucki promised that she'd have the RCMP release details from the investigation that tied into pending gun control laws and would, quote, make officers and the public safer. Showing integrity, the Nova Scotia RCMP refused to comply to prevent the investigation from being compromised. Good for them.
Yep.
Beyond this, a communications director with the Nova Scotia RCMP testified under oath. Minister Blair, the Prime Minister, all of these people, they were weighing in on what we could and couldn't say. They were turning the investigation political for their own means right away, standing on dead bodies. Yeah. The RCMP failed this community and these families. This guy should never have been out. And instead of saying, oh my God, we got this wrong, people are dead, they pivot and come out and use it as an opportunity to come after millions of lawful Canadian gun owners. Yep. They took their own failure and deflected it at everybody else who did everything right in this country, some 2 million Canadian gun owners. They thought, you know what? We screwed this up. Let's make them the bad guy. It's absolutely revolting.
And Sheila, if I may interject, let's point out that the mass murderer, that firearm he had, was not legally acquired. It was illegally smuggled. Brought up from the United States.
It was smuggled, and the Liberals have done nothing to combat smuggling. Yeah. All they've done with their legislation is focus on people who are already doing the right thing.
In fact, he was on a watch list in terms of firearms from complaints, right?
Yeah.
So, this isn't some, duck farmer that lost his mind, went to his gun rack and started mowing down people with his legally acquired rifle. No, far from it. And yet it was all about, let's get, the make and model of gun to have that be the poster child, if you will, for our big 1,500 plus gun ban coming up. Because you see, we're trying to save Canadians. You're absolutely right. It almost sounds vulgar that they're standing on the graves of those 22 victims. But that's what they're doing. They're exploiting the deaths.
They saw it as an opportunity.
Yep.
They saw it as an opportunity to push through this legislation. They went after 1,500 models. They took these guns and said, let's blow this up as big as possible. We've got 22 dead people. We've got a real opportunity here. That's what they did. Yeah. The commission's report indicates that Lucki took a different approach. She was making back-end pushes. She was pushing for legislation. It wasn't just that she was going along to get along with the Liberals. She became an advocate for gun grabbing too. That's not her role as the national police chief. She was pushing for legislation that fit the platform of the current governing party. What does she want to be, a senator or something? Lucki, I'm sure if we had given her one more 4-year election cycle, she'd be running for Bill Blair's job. Better believe it.
You know what? That's an interesting hypothesis, Sheila. So who would be the worst public safety minister? Bill Blair, the former one, Marco Mendicino, a.k.a. Ottawa's Pinocchio, or Brenda Lucki? I mean, Wow, what a choice. Jeez.
Mendocino's just the lying idiot. He's dangerous because he's stupid. Brenda Lucky's conniving and dishonest.
Yeah.
She has zero integrity, no ethics. It says Lucky was stepping far outside her role as police chief, wanting to use the tragedy to manufacture consent for laws the Liberals hadn't even put forth yet. She was pushing the Liberals in this direction, and the Liberals, being lazy, said, sure, let's do her. Now, the timeline here is also very damning. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's gun control laws were likely in the works before the shooting. I mean, it's Liberals are always trying to grab a gun in the background. That should surprise no one. But the timeline here is damning. The massacre took place on April 18th and 19th, while the meeting where Lucky spoke of upcoming gun control laws was on April 28th. 10 days later. I wonder if the funerals were all over yet, Brenda. By May 1st, the Liberals announced a ban on 1,500 types of guns without any gun-specific details mentioned in the press conference. So evidently, they weren't necessary. It's just
and Sheila,
revolting. It just
now
turns my stomach. These poor families being political tools.
Yeah, these families are being re-victimized, in my view. But here's the thing. The National Post really sets the table there on how damning this story is. The Three Stooges that are the principal figures here are all denying the allegations, but that's what they do. Deny.
I'm sure there's a paper trail. I'm sure there's meeting notes. I'm sure there's briefing notes. And it looks like the people who were probably on the receiving end of many of these emails and briefing notes have copies and integrity because they pushed back. And so just wait till that's all on the table.
But, Sheila, here's my question to you. What do you want to bet in the days ahead when the editorials and the op-ed pieces are being written by those in the legacy media, i.e. the media that is being funded by the Justin Trudeau Liberals? I'm guessing the narrative is going to be this. Yes, maybe, perhaps, there was some improper behavior by those in charge in terms of compromising an investigation. However, in the big picture, if this is about getting mean, nasty guns off the street, well, then what they did justifies the means. I think that's what we're going to see, because especially from downtown liberal city media outlets, they hear the word gun and they need grief counseling. I think that's what they're, instead of calling for resignations or firings, they're going to say the ends justified the means in this case.
Well, look what came of the AgaCon controversy. Look what came of SNC-Lavalin.
Yep.
These
Me Too.
Scandals, Me Too.
Blackface.
This stuff is just right there out in the open. And at the end of it all, Justin Trudeau seems to survive because he has the Praetorian Guard media, as Mark Levin likes to say, protecting him. And not only are they ideologically compatible, but they rely on Justin Trudeau for their financial survival. And so there's an extra incentive here to go along with Justin Trudeau, to be outraged in the moment, but then to say, as you say, the ends justify the means. And look how much safer Canada is because duck hunters in Saskatchewan are having a hard time because Justin Trudeau has outlawed all their favorite firearms. But I have a real hard time trusting the RCMP to police Canadians and lawful Canadian gun owners when they couldn't get this guy who had himself on a watch list. They couldn't deal with him. They're going to deal with 2.1 million other innocent people. The good thing about all those 2.1 million people is they're actually law-abiding. They've already done the right thing. You couldn't deal with the one dirtbag.
Great point,
and now 22
Sheila.
people are dead.
Yeah, they knew he was a clear and present danger, to use that terminology, and still he got away with that mass murder. By the way, when we were going through the laundry list of Justin Trudeau scandals, I misspoke. I said Me Too. I meant the We charity. So we instead
Oh,
of
no,
me.
there's a Me Too in there too, because he did rope that journalist.
That's right,
So,
Rose
you know,
Knight. So
that's fine.
Even when I screw up, I come up with another Justin Trudeau.
That's the thing. Like, pick the liberal cause of the day that they are championing, and Justin Trudeau has been on the wrong side of it, and nobody seems to care. Environmentalism. You know, he's blowing through jet fuel like it's going out of style. He's a feminist, but he groped that journalist. He's the most open and transparent government ever. He's blocking access requests and blocking journalists all the time, fighting journalists in court. Name whatever it is that he goes out in the media and says that that's who he is. In practice, he's the opposite of all those things.
And let's not forget the fourth musketeer here, Sheila. Namely Jagmeet Singh waving his finger, shame, shame. And yet, will he and his party vote against this government? No. To them, the operative number is 2025. Operative, why? Well, because that's 6 years of service for Jagmeet Singh. That means he gets a pension. That guy is despicable. Even in light of a mass murder, that will not change his mind for his insatiable quest to be living for the rest of his life off the taxpayer teat. Unbelievable. And if you're an NDP supporter, you got to ask yourself, why?
Yeah, he goes around talking about democracy all the time, but he's disenfranchised his own voters who did not vote for Justin Trudeau. He's disenfranchised the Conservatives, and he's skewing parliamentary democracy. He's the real sticky widget here, because Justin Trudeau is not capable of doing any of the things that he wants to do to Canada without the support of Jagmeet Singh, who incidentally brought his baby to the House of Commons yesterday. And
I saw that.
I've had to take my kids to some strange places because they've never actually even had a babysitter that they weren't related to. So I just, I'm a mom, I take my kids places. But I'm pretty sure Jagmeet Singh has a wife, and what was more odd about all of it was there was a Liberal MP who called Jagmeet's baby a little person or a little human or a small human or something, and he not in a cute way, just because they didn't want to misgender the baby, which I think is a girl.
Yeah, be careful. You don't want to be brought before a human rights commission for misgendering somebody.
Right.
Sheila. You know what this reminds me of? There's a brilliant movie, folks. If you haven't seen it, it's called There Will Be Blood. And it's about the beginning of the American oil industry. And there's a con man going around trying to get people to give up their mineral rights because he wants their oil. He sees the future. And he knows it's going to be oil driven. And what he does is he goes to an orphanage and he adopts a child, a handicapped child. The child's deaf, just so he can bring him along as a prop, because when he does his sales pitch, he's hoping people will have sympathy for him because he's a widower with a handicapped child. That's the vibe I got from Jagmeet Singh in the House.
I just don't understand what point he's trying to prove. He's rich. Have somebody watch your kid for a couple hours. You know what I mean? Like, again, I say I've taken my kids a lot of places where I just did because my husband works out of town and I'm the mom. I take my kids places. But he's infinitely wealthy. You're telling me you couldn't get somebody to watch your kids while you're in the House of Commons, or your kid while you're in the House? Sure, he could.
Sheila,
this
I
is
know
just
for
to prove a point. He's a working parent. He's really relatable. Can't you see?
Yeah, no, that everything is done by design. And you're right. This whole idea, look, I'm a working parent, which is false.
I'm just like you. I have the same struggles as you, except you're wearing a Rolex. So no, you don't. And I'm wearing a Fitbit, okay?
And driving a BMW M3. And the thing is, I know he has this staff because I saw it myself on Remembrance Day, Sheila. Maurizio and I were there to cover Remembrance Day in Ottawa. And we were across the street from Jagmeet Singh. But it was like a wall of human beings protecting him like a bubble in case there was some impolite question being slung from a journalist. And there must have been 5 or 6 people in that entourage. And you're telling me not one of them could watch the kid during question period?
Look, and I'm all for putting your kids first. If your kid is the most important thing you do every day, great. Maybe you don't need to be a parliamentarian then. Maybe you don't, like, there's this idea that you think you can do it all and be it all and none of it suffers. That's absolutely not true. I know this. I'm a mom. That's why I didn't even start this job full time until my littlest one was in school full time. I'm happy that he sees his time with his child as important, his little person as important. So maybe don't be a parliamentarian. You could just go spend all the time you want with your daughter. I think the nation might be a better place.
Well, Sheila, I always look for the silver lining, as you know. So let's be grateful that at least during question period with the little person, Jagmeet Singh didn't chest feed the little darling.
You know, and there's a lot, it gets a little hectic and frisky sometimes in the House of Commons with the screaming and the jeering and the banging on the tables. I'm not sure if that's the best place for a baby.
Yeah. You know? The baby behaves more politely and more civilly than many of the
Sometimes the prime minister runs across the floor and elbows a lady in the booth.
Oh, remember that?
Things can happen there. Maybe leave the baby at home.
Yeah, it's not a safe space, Jagmeet.
Like, they're always complaining about decorum and we have to be more civil. Well, if it's so bad that you're complaining about it, maybe it's not the best place for your child.
Yeah. And you know what? We should jump ahead because speaking of children and speaking of misgendering and all that other nonsense, I see, and you've got skin in the game here, Sheila.
I do.
The International Rugby Governing Body, I thought they had already done this, but it says they have banned transgendered athletes from competing against women. Good for you. You know, this topic came up the other day on Toronto Talk Radio, and it was all about how people are getting hysterical over an issue that doesn't exist. That was the narrative. Of course, the biological females on the panel I listened to, they weren't allowed to weigh in. It was just men.
Right.
And there was another guy, he has a connection with the women's national soccer team, and there's a transgendered I don't even know what the pronoun is, a trend person, I guess, on that. And, it's really nothing to see here. Oh, no, there is a lot to see here. We've gone through it time and time again, Sheila, that with muscle mass, cardiovascular, testosterone, biological
bone density, everything. Yeah.
Everything. And, 'twas ever the case that there's been separate male and female divisions in every sport except equestrian and auto racing, in which the horse and the car are the equalizers. And we have seen failures like Leah Thomas, who was a mediocre male swimmer at best, never going to get to the podium, go into female swimming, and she's, cleaning the field in terms of running away with victories. I say to the International Rugby Governing Body, good for you. Thank God, Sheila, there is some strong men and strong women out there that says we are not going to put up with this nonsense and when I look at the radical transgender movement, I see a lot of mental illness there. We are not going to bend the knee. We are going to get a load of this, because I thought you lefties love this. Follow the science, which is to say that a biological man cannot, especially in a high contact sport, which is rugby, compete against a biological woman, because we're looking at serious injuries if we allow this to continue.
I see this as the peak, the pinnacle of misogyny. Yeah. This is the pinnacle of woman hate, that a biological man can be a better woman than me, than my daughter, who's over in Ireland right now playing rugby.
That's right.
This idea that we should be perfectly okay with opportunities being stolen from high-performing female athletes, their scholarships being taken, their sponsorships being taken, their spot on teams being taken after they've worked their whole lives, that we should be okay in the name of tolerance is outrageous. Yeah. That is woman hate. I don't care how you slice it. When you are telling a biological man that he's a better woman than your daughter, who's trained for the spot she's in, that's outrageous. And I have to question why these biological male rugby players feel entitled to hit women all day. Because at the end of the day, that's what this comes down to. They're going to get on a field where nobody is wearing equipment. The only equipment they wear sometimes is to protect for cauliflower ears and a mouth guard. That's it. They're coming into contact with women, smaller bodies, smaller bone density, smaller cardiovascular health. Their hearts and lungs are smaller. This is what we're dealing with. And I question why these men feel entitled to get onto a field and smash women like that. Are they making up for it? Feels like compensating for something.
100%. You know what? I think you're right. I think this is the ultimate expression of misogyny. And if we look at it further, I mean, at the end of the day, sports, it's just fun and games. It's the toy department of the department store, if you want to call it that. But in the bigger picture right now, especially in this country, thanks to Justin Trudeau answering a question at a town hall meeting from a radical transgender activist, you have transgendered, actually, they're not even transgendered. They are biological
just identified.
Males. Simply saying, I identify as a woman. Bingo, you're in prison with women that
and
you
a lot
can
of
prey
these
on.
People are in prison for crimes of moral turpitude or whatever they call it.
Yes.
Or lying, for being dishonest. Like their criminality often involves dishonesty. So why wouldn't they lie about this thing either? To get an easy ride. Yeah.
And where is the feminist movement when it comes to that? Well, I met one a couple of years ago. Sherry DeNovo used to be an NDP MPP here in Ontario. And I brought up about this whole issue of trans people in sports. And all she would do was bark into the microphone. Trans women are real women. Trans women are real women. That's not a discussion. That's not answering the question. That's not addressing the inherent problems here. And as much as I say, good for you, International Rugby Union, for having the balls to stand up to this insanity. Shame on you, NCAA, for being such cowards, for letting that circus act, Leah Thomas, jump into the pool with real women and win those championships. They could have done exactly what the rugby union has done, Sheila. Here, I'll put it out to you as a biological woman. I mean, look at that. Come on. What is this? The freak shows coming in to the swim meet? Give me a break. Look at the size difference. Unbelievable. Sheila,
it's just so shameless. It's so shameless.
So if we can see the rugby union doing this, taking a just position, a scientific position, why couldn't the NCAA do so in the United States?
I guess maybe rugby is not a completely woke sport yet. When you have people, engaged in feats of strength on a field with no equipment, it's a little bit of a different culture than a college swimming sport, right? I sent the team in HQ this clip from 60 Minutes Australia, and they are interviewing a doctor who is a transgender, like male to female, still an athlete, I guess, a golfer. And they're defending Hannah Mountsie. And this is a transgender, so male to female rugby player who has now been banned from participating in the league. And just watch this. It feels like you're living in the Twilight Zone, especially the remarks, because this doctor says the only people who seem upset about this is older male administrators. You mean like you, doctor? But anyway, it's not older male administrators. It's female athletes and their moms, like me. Anyway, watch this. I mean, it's the Twilight Zone. It feels like we're being gaslit in real time.
Do you accept the AFL's argument that you do have a size advantage over some of your opponents?
I think the biggest issue is not necessarily that I'm too big or too strong now. It's more, okay, you're already big, you're already strong, whatever. But what if you were to get into that elite training environment and they would build you up,
heck?
put on an extra 15 kilos, and you just push everyone aside. But physiologically, that's just not going to happen.
The people who seem to have the biggest problem with this is male administrators, but the female competitors haven't raised their voices at all.
Lisa Watson knows better than most what Hannah's going through. She's a doctor who specialises in transgender health issues and is also a transgender athlete. After 2 years of hormone replacement therapy, she says Hannah's body has no residual benefits from her time as a male.
Prior to her transitioning, she had a V8 motor powering this big muscle frame. Now she's transitioned and her testosterone level has dropped and her muscle mass has decreased and her strength and stamina has decreased. She's now got a little 4-cylinder engine, so she's actually at a physical disadvantage.
Give me a
Dr.
break.
Watson
That's enough.
suspects
This is
there are
madness.
other.
Watch that. Like, it's just the neck. Like, look at that person's neck and then look at mine.
Oh
I'm
my God.
I'm a somewhat fit woman. Look,
Ugh.
the walking up the stairs. It's like to say that this person doesn't have a biological advantage over the female athletes is crazy. I mean, it's just madness. You can see it with your eyes. And then to make the comparison that, they had a V8 and now it's like they're running on a 4-cylinder. So that's what you think of female athletes, that they're just some crappy Dodge Neon? Is that what you think? Like, it's just so sexist and crazy. When you watch it, you've got no biological advantage.
Well,
Are you hard of sight? Like, you can see it. The rippling muscles across the chest.
Yeah. Well, Sheila, first of all, I'm just wondering if you can do the show solo for the next 5 minutes, because I feel like I have to go and boil myself right now after watching those two. But seriously, of course, the doctor doing this regendering surgery, or whatever you're going to call it, is supportive, because, as always, folks, follow the money. This is good for business. It's not good for female sports. It's good for his business. And if you think I'm going to call that grotesque facsimile of a woman her, you got another thing coming. That's what it's all about in that case. And of course, yet again, what a softball interview, right? Just, throwing out, well, some people think, and not challenging, the answers, the propaganda coming from these fake females. And so I think, Sheila, we'll have to watch other sports around the world to see if we'll get a critical mass of what's happening in terms of the rugby union. Because I'll tell you, one of the ground zero events some 20 years ago, because back when Ezra Levant ran Western Standard magazine, I would freelance from time to time. And it was a story out in British Columbia where a male decided he's going to be a female mountain bike racer. Guess what? Yep. Cleaned the clocks of all the female competitors. And the most grotesque story of all, and geez, imagine that, Sheila, what we thought was a freak show come to life. That was just somebody ahead of the curve 20 years later. There was a major race in which he won, and they have the podium. He's in first place and two biological women in second and third. And the boyfriend of the silver medalist ran up to the podium and put an oversized T-shirt on her, which said, 100% real woman. And for that, the second place finisher was suspended by the Canadian Cycling Association, or whatever the governing body is for mountain bike racing. Can you imagine? For telling the truth, you are going to sit out so we can have this Franken female continue to clean the clocks of other cyclists. What a grotesque situation, driven by, I think, wokeness and political correctness, because there ain't no science here, Sheila, because the science says this is offside.
And again, I reiterate the way I always do. I don't care how you live your life. I'm too busy working and taking care of my family to care how other people live their lives.
That's right.
But you don't get to steal opportunities from girls. I'm not even saying don't play sports, but you got to figure something else out, because there are too many girls working too hard for their opportunities to be robbed of them at the last minute.
Sheila, I'm not kidding here. And I would actually tune in as a spectator or go see it live. We have male division, female division, and other. Anything goes. It is a sporting gong show. If you're, a 450-pound ex-linebacker, if you're a 98-pound female, don't care how you identify, just throw them in one big ring like it's literally a circus. I would watch that. It would be so bad. It would actually be
Well,
good.
I would hope for something a little more structured than David Menzies' gender diverse Royal Rumble. Like, I would hope that it was, but again, like, this is what Linda Blade advocates for.
Yeah.
She says there has to be a different category. There has to be a different league. Everybody benefits from sport when it's fair. And that's the whole idea of sportsmanship. We have a word around fairness and being collegial and treating others with respect and admiring everybody else's achievements and making yourself better so that you can compete on an even playing field with somebody else. That's sportsmanship. This is the opposite of sportsmanship.
Indeed.
There has to be another way.
Indeed, Sheila. And all I got to say is this. Somewhere, trans cat weeps. Anyway,
One more thing. We should get to one more story before we go. I get so fired
and
up.
I think we have comments too, but your choice. Ladies first, as they say. Or is that, I don't know, gender offensive?
I'm still good with chivalry. And I get fired up on the rugby issue because the difference between male and female rugby is, just watch on a split screen. The female rugby players, who are excellent in their own right, versus the male rugby players.
Yep.
The speed level is different. The hitting's different. And I say this as someone who's a fan of ladies rugby. It's just so much different. And it's just so dangerous for those girls.
It is.
To be competing against a boy. Let's get, because it's in the YouTube headline. The China doesn't like conservatives. And I find this interesting that this is a topic now. So it sounds like the Chinese government, a federal research unit, whatever that is, when they're too busy looking for people saying mean things about Justin Trudeau online so that they can have their bank account seized, they actually did some real intelligence. And they think the Chinese Communist Party has an information operation that is aimed to discourage Canadians of Chinese heritage from voting for the Conservatives in the last election. Thanks, Tips. That's how Kenny Chu lost his seat. Thanks for showing up after the fact. This is something these people are supposed to be watching out for as the election's happening and putting a stop to it, right? Like, that's elections integrity. But they're too busy cracking down on people who write uncomfortable books about the prime minister, like Justin Trudeau. They're worried about that. Yeah. They're cracking down on truckers who are dissidents with regard to Justin Trudeau's COVID lockdowns. That's who these people are keeping their gaze to. Instead, China is intervening on behalf of the Liberals, and nobody seems to think it's a big deal until 6 months after the last election. They report on something everybody already knew. And
I know Aaron O'Toole, he said, Sheila, that this potentially cost the Conservatives 7 or 9 seats. It was
when he wasn't costing them seats, the Chinese government was costing them seats.
Yeah, and by the way, there's absolutely, even if he's right, there's no way to prove that statement. But if it did cost seats in close ridings, and we're looking at a Liberal minority government, that's significant. Another 7 or 9 seats going blue instead of red. Once again, we can never prove it. But it's funny. I'm listening to all the interviews on talk radio as I'm coming in today about this story, Sheila. And the one question none of the legacy media journalists or talk show hosts will ask is simply this: why would the Communist Party of China or the government of China, well, they're they're linked together. There's no difference.
Yeah.
Why would they be anti-conservative and pro-liberal in the first place? I think that's an obvious question to ask. And I think we know the answer. I mean, Justin Trudeau has stated he has a basic admiration for the dictatorship of China in terms of getting things done. And boy, is he embracing that toolbook as he continues to clamp down on our rights, liberties, and freedoms. But, it's just appalling that the elephant in the room isn't even addressed about this story.
No, I mean, and Justin Trudeau's Liberals, they claim to be, the world's climate leaders. But they also had that joint committee funded by the Canadian government. They were funding this part of the Chinese government that was like their climate task force. The Chinese government's climate task force basically was being funded by Canada. And they cracked down on Canadian oil and gas. They don't advocate for export pipelines. They attack Canadian coal. Canadian electricity has to be green, thus more expensive, which hurts our manufacturing sector. It hurts consumers. But they turn a complete blind eye to all the things that China does. I think it's one new coal-fired generation station a week. Yeah. They're the world's largest consumer of coal. And in Alberta here, where we use clean coal technology developed in part by the oil sands, they use oil sands technology in the scrubbers. And we're not allowed to use coal anymore because Justin Trudeau said so,
And Sheila, Sebastian Vettel said so too, the Formula One driver that wears a shirt to Canada.
The guy whose country's buying all the natural gas from Russia. Yeah, thanks.
It's like, how do you make sense of this? Unbelievable. Well, we do have some chats, I'm sure, to get to before the show ends. So if you can take it away, Sheila Gunn Reid.
I feel happy that we got to everything in the YouTube headline because...
Oh, yes, that's important.
I get the emails. Alrighty. So we've got Sojourner gives us $5, a 22% pay raise, which this is with regard to Theresa Tam. We're all sacrificing. We're all in this together. The common good, not. Yeah. These people who are telling you that we're all in this together, they're in it for themselves. We're in it together, not them. They're over there.
The optics stink, for sure. And by the way, Sojourner, isn't that the name of Thor's hammer? Or do I stand corrected here?
I don't know what Thor's hammer's name is.
I think Thor's going to be a chick in the next movie.
Of course.
Because they did that in the comics, and it's working so well there with comic sales just plummeting.
Yeah. I mean, I think Pixar's learning a hard lesson right now with their Buzz Lightyear thing.
Yeah, I know.
You take a movie and a concept that's just completely played out after 20 years of just cranking out movies about the same thing for the sake of it. They've taken this cute movie, beaten it to death, and then made it woke. I can't figure out why nobody's watching anymore. And I don't know, maybe the first two were okay.
And you know what, Sheila? If Pixar ever does a live action movie of Buzz Lightyear, I suggest our colleague Adam Seuss plays the title character. Have you ever? Don't you think there's a resemblance there? I don't know if we can later on put up a picture of Buzz Lightyear and Adam Seuss, but I'm telling you,
they have the same square jaw and everything. Yeah, the barrel chest. He's barrel chested like a wannabe female rugby player. Okay, Annalisa, 1964. This is David Menzies' fan club president. She says she gives $20. That's great. Thank you, Annalisa. I poke jest at you every day because, well, I don't see what you see. I'm kidding. Hello, my two favorite rebels. I missed the show yesterday, but I heard it was National Kiss Day.
Yes. Not to be confused, by the way, Sheila, with International Kiss Day. That's in July. And I believe it's January 12th. Please make note of this, Sheila and Annalisa. January 12th, I believe, is International Kiss a Ginger Day. So take that information and do with it what you will.
You're a ginger. My husband's a ginger. Anyhow, Sheila, would you be so kind and give my sweet Menzies a big smoochy woochie for me? I've never been so pleased to work in Alberta than exactly this moment right now.
And
I
for
would love
me-
to, Annalisa, but I can't.
And I know Sheila's dear husband works in the oil sands, which I'm sure he could probably take me 1, 2, 3, just like that. So I'm going to stay in my safe space of the greater Toronto area.
Only the people who know me in real life know what my husband looks like. And he's just a regular guy. He's just a regular guy.
That might open a can of whoop ass if you get anywhere too close to his wife. So
He's currently working on a golf cart in my garage. Brought a golf cart home from a farm sale, and he's not done any actual work around the house since that stupid thing came home. Anyway, enough about my complaining. Aquas Guys 3636 $2. Apparently Michelle Rempel got okay to run for UCP leadership. I did see that because you have to hold a membership for a certain amount of time before you can run for leader, unless you can get the party to waive that. And they did. Now I don't know how serious she is about actually running for leader. I think maybe she said she was running for leader as like I gotta unhitch my horse from the Patrick Brown cart. And maybe this is the best way to do it, by abandoning that sinking ship and then saying that you're contemplating running for the UCP leadership while also not running for the UCP leadership. We'll see. I don't know.
But Sheila, here's the question. I buy into your theory, by the way. Create a convenient excuse. But what in blue hell was Michelle Rempel thinking?
I have no idea.
Attaching her wagon to that Titanic Captain Patrick Brown. I mean, you're closer, to these Alberta-based politics.
I don't know.
No?
I have no idea. I've no clue. I don't even have an inkling why. I have absolutely no clue. No clue whatsoever.
Incredible.
Yeah, I have absolutely no clue. Becca Henderson, a buck, is discussing that Trudeau stood on the graves for politics, just like he visited the Indigenous graves for a photo shoot, but went surfing and ignored Indigenous people on the holiday he created.
Oh,
what
yeah.
an excellent point.
I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, he went to that. It wasn't a mass grave. No, but before he went to Tofino, he went for the photo op in Saskatchewan, where the graves were rediscovered. It sounds like it was a neglected cemetery.
Yeah.
And so he stood there with the teddy bear in hand, got that photo taken. Then he takes off surfing in Tofino on the day that he created to remember residential schools, and wouldn't meet with anybody. He's just ridiculous. But you got your holiday, so quit asking him for stuff, okay?
Yeah, boy, talk about leading by example. On that particular National Day of Mourning, we're supposed to go surfing. We're supposed to embrace water sports. What a disgrace. I yet again, we went through that laundry list of Trudeau scandals. We had forgotten that collectively,
Yeah.
Sheila. There's so many, right?
I know.
But
it's hard. It's hard. We should write a book or at least keep some sort of spreadsheet, because people forget.
Yeah.
They really do. Becca Henderson gives us a buck and says, it's a complete lie that women haven't stood up to men in women's sports. The women who had been demonized scared other women who wanted to stand up. That is an excellent point, actually. There are some women who do stand up, but pretty quickly, as David points out, even if you're engaged in even a little bit of activism about, like maybe you shouldn't be able to give me a concussion on the field, they are the ones that get attacked. They are the ones who end up, with their career destroyed. But at the same time, if you are catastrophically injured, isn't your career destroyed anyway? Yes.
And here's the thing. What we need is critical mass, because what are the sports authorities going to do? Fire all the biological female athletes? For example, in these NCAA swim meets, Sheila, when you had Leah Thomas, that male, competing against those biological females, my fantasy, which never came to fruition, was that they would all line up waiting for the starter's gun to go off to dive into the pool, and the starter's gun goes off, and Leah Thomas jumps in the pool, and all the other real women swimmers just walk to the dressing room.
Well, you're going to lose anyway, right?
Pardon me?
What difference?
Oh yeah, they're going to lose anyway. But what a statement that would make, and and to show what a circus that is. That Leah Thomas wins a race in which only Leah Thomas was the competitor. I think that might have started some wheels moving, because it's an embarrassment for the NCAA. So that's what we need, is critical mass to stand up to the lunatic fringe.
Yeah. Mandy, 1971, gives us a buck and says, will you be covering the James Top meeting with federal representatives? They're telling the truth to the Canadian public. Well, what just happened there? We did have a journalist yesterday at the arrival of James Top in Ottawa. So stay tuned for that. We had William there on the scene. So he's just ripping it up in Ottawa. Like I said, there's going to be Liberal MPs who are just like wearing disguises, like wearing Groucho Marx disguises to hide from him, because he's basically running up to the street. Anybody wearing a suit on the streets of Ottawa, he's going to talk to them. And he's gotten quite a few and caught them really off guard, where they say some they either say honest things or they screw up completely.
Sheila, a fake nose, mustache, and glasses, that's not going to fool our William, who's really hitting it out of the park there. I'm thinking full burqa, maybe that might throw William off the scent, but he's doing a great job there.
He's doing a fantastic job. He just started with us.
Yeah.
And it just shows how lazy the media is in Ottawa. Like, the Liberal MPs are just out there on the street. All you have to do is go talk to them.
Oh,
they
Sheila,
don't.
I'm afraid, my dear, you're wrong about that. It's not laziness. It's not biting the hand that feeds.
Right.
It's compliance. Yeah. They know what's going to happen to them if they ask impolite questions, and which is to say they won't be asking any questions that much longer. The attack dogs, the pit bulls, they've become trained seals on Team Trudeau. It is pathetic.
I see that. Maybe we can dig up that. Efron, I haven't seen how, or Olivia, a couple of comments down about a water fountain lifeguard. If that's a thing, maybe you can find an article, because I'm kind of interested in learning about that. I thought I knew all the dumb things Edmonton was up to lately, but I didn't learn about that.
What do you mean?
We'll get to it in a second. Becca Henderson gives us a buck. China doesn't like the Conservatives. More reason to be conservative.
Yeah.
I said something like that in the morning meeting. Somebody was complaining and they said, Sheila, call off your dogs, meaning my journalists. And I said, that's how you get more dogs. Also, don't call the journalists dogs. But yeah.
And also, I mean, talk about, a dubious endorsement. The Communist Party of China endorses the Liberal Party of Canada. Wow.
Not just endorses them, goes out of their way to spend resources and expend resources to meddle in Canadian politics on behalf of the Liberals. It goes a little further than endorsing, doesn't it?
Incredible.
Joyful from the Heart gives us a buck. Hope this makes it in. Do you think we can do something, a petition to get the vax requirements for truckers removed? It isn't fair. You know what? I think there might be something in the works. And I know that they are finally re-examining the vax mandate for our military, because while the bureaucrats in Ottawa were allowed to go back to work without getting the jab, the military were still required to, after the federal government, made sure that they all got the Moderna vaccine, which was ultimately then not recommended for people of men of military fighting age, which isn't that convenient.
Sheila, how is that possibly justified, that the pencil neck geek bureaucrats
That's what I'm saying.
have a different standard from the actual soldiers that might have to make the ultimate sacrifice? Where's the science? Where's the political reason for that matter? What is the rationale for this double standard?
I would suggest that still, even though it's changing and getting so insufferably woke, at least in the upper ranks and in management, the majority of people in the military probably wouldn't vote for Justin Trudeau. So what's the political price to pay? Whereas bureaucrats generally vote Liberal.
You know what,
NDP.
Sheila? You've done it again. I never thought about that, but that is how crass and vulgar this government is. I think you're right. That's the only thing that explains this.
It's why the vax mandate remains for cross-border truckers too.
Yeah.
You know, same reason. The Grouchy Fish gives us $10. Well, thanks. You two are great together. No matter how fired up I get about the issues that are plaguing our country, you always find a way to make me laugh. Oh, well, thanks.
Oh, well, Grouchy Fish, thank you. But believe me, Sheila and I, on the inside, we're crying.
Yeah. Oh, then somebody else writes, Michelle Rampol Garner is no longer running for UCP Alberta Premiership. I don't think she even officially announced that she was running. She just said that she was considering it, and then they got that rule waived to make it look like she was serious. And but I think it was just like her escape hatch, like she pulled the chute.
And I think that was a message, according to super producer Olivia, a message from Yankee in Florida. You know, who's more on the ball than us in Canada, evidently. But boy, that leadership race, that sure didn't last long. But it just proves your theory.
I didn't think it was serious. I didn't think it was serious. It was like, oh, I got to find a reason to distance myself from this catastrophe.
Well, you know what? But you guessed it correctly. You know, give yourself a Barry Horowitz pat on the back, Sheila Gunreed.
Thank you. Nice and Shiny gives us a buck and says, thoughts on Edmonton water fountain lifeguards? Is that a thing, or are you just making fun of Edmonton because they're awful?
Okay.
Oh my God. Lifeguards at Edmonton City Hall water fountain generate mixed reviews.
Wait a minute.
Cannot.
Okay, is that what a water fountain is? It's not a drinking fountain.
No, it's just like, look at how the little boy running in the background. It's literally at your ankles. That's in front of Edmonton City Hall. What is it? So one of these stupid bureaucrats going to fall in there and drown in 3 inches of water? Like, look, they put a lifeguard there.
Unbelievable. You know,
Edmonton,
at least,
you're the worst. I make fun of Edmonton, but I mean, they're beyond parody.
But Sheila, do you remember, speaking of parody and beyond it, do you remember how 2 years ago I went to cover the Coburg Beach, which is a beautiful stretch of beach? Coburg, of course, where our beloved colleague Tamara Ugolini lives. And I went into the water, which because there was a loophole. If you entered through the beach area, you're going to get smacked with an $860 ticket. But if you went down the slippery rocks, I think that was somehow designated federal land, and the bylaw didn't have the bailiwick to give you a ticket. So I got closer and closer to the beach, and I'm walking along in the water, and there's a bylaw officer walking parallel with me, looking at me, and we're having a conversation. And I asked him, I said, how close to the beach, the actual sand, do I have to come before I'm in ticket territory? And he said, the rule, sir, is if I see your ankles, you're going to get a ticket. So I had to make sure there was enough water covering my ankles, which isn't a lot of water. What's that? Maybe 4.5 inches of water. And this guy, like a hawk looking at a trout, was eagle-eyed watching my ankles because if he spotted them, that's a ticket. Welcome to clown world, folks.
Holy cow. If they need any lifeguards to help with the ankle deep water, Edmonton's probably got a few. I imagine those lifeguards are making a pretty penny too. Jorgie gives us a buck and says, women's sports is women's sports, men's sports is men's sports. There should be an open league as well. Easy peasy. Oh, Alberta question for Sheila. What are Danielle Smith's odds? I think she's probably the front runner. And that's the thing about Albertans. We're actually pretty forgiving.
Yes.
If you actually admit that you did something wrong. Many people forgave Jason Kenney when he apologized for naming some businesses essential and others not.
Yeah.
And he said, like, I made a mistake. And everyone's like, look, he's owning up to it. Let's see what he does next. And then he locked us down again. So, she made that catastrophe of a decision way back in, I think, 2014, where she decided to cross the floor to join the PCs. She paid for it. at the election. And then she has spent probably 7 years trying to redeem herself of that. And I think people see that that's probably sincere. I don't have a favorite in this race. You'll never, ever know who my favorite is anyway. You might know who I don't like, but you'll never know who my favorite is. But I do know that she is the only one so far who said that she would immediately have an amnesty for the COVID tickets and fines for the pastors, but for everybody too. Not only that, she said she would go one step further and say that she would go on an apology tour all across Alberta just to say, because people need to hear from the government that they got it wrong and it won't happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I bet you if any politician in Canada could reverse the time-space continuum, it would be Miss Smith for that crossing of the floor. What a crucial, terrible error in judgment that was.
I think I just got a notice on my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully I become unfrozen and you can see me fine, and we'll finish up these. Mandy 1971 gives us $1 and says, I watched the Trucker Rebellion Coots movie last night on the big screen at Canyon Meadows Cinema. If you missed it, it's showing there again on the 29th in Calgary. It was really good. I wish that more of the conclusion would have been included in the movie. Well, interestingly enough, we are working on a docu-series. Our Sid Fizzard, who you saw in the movie there, right until the very end. And he's working on a docu-series wherein you'll be able to see his footage of just how things played out after that time. Mandy 1971 gives us $1 and says, you guys, for all the hard work that you do. Yeah, we're okay. We're fine. Yeah. January 777 gives us $5. Comment: if Alberta was its own country, easy for the people to come together
and demonstrate should the government go sideways. As it stands, the Libs can't get away with everything they do. Well, you know what? It's a good question in terms of, do we have Sheila back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Sheila, how... Like, seriously speaking, if there were a referendum today in terms of Alberta separation, what are we talking about? Is that in the realm of possibility? 50% plus one?
Yeah, I saw some polling that said that well over 50% of Albertans expressed some form of separation sentiment. Now, what does that even mean? Does that mean we want the same deal as Quebec? Okay. Does that mean that we are going to be our own independent country? Does that mean that we're going to join the United States? Does that mean that we are just like a territory of Canada, but working more autonomously within Confederation? Who even knows? And that's the problem with the separatist movement, is they haven't actually said what they want to do. And so you need to tell people what you want to do. And you need to tell people that you've already examined, like what to do with the RCMP, what to do with the military, what to do with taxes, what to do with the pension plan, all these federal assets that are in our province. How are you going to figure that out? And I don't think anybody's reached into Quebec for their expertise and said, how did you guys figure that out to answer that question in advance of your referendum? I don't think the Canadian or the Alberta separatist movement is anywhere near there yet.
I agree. And I think looking at the Quebec situation, it was 1976, I think the René Lévesque-led PQ government came to power on the promise of we're going to go for a referendum on separation. And I think the first one might have been 1980, and it failed. But, it was interesting to see the wording of separation change after the first referendum failed, because you might recall, Sheila, they started calling separation sovereignty association. And what that really meant is that, well, we're going to be our own country, but we're still going to be taxpayer supported by Canada. We're still going to keep our fingers in the till. Nice try. That ain't working either, right? So, but I think maybe because of demographic changes in Quebec, I don't think Quebec would have the sufficient critical mass to have that 50% plus one anymore, Sheila. They couldn't do it twice, 80, and I'm guessing, was it 94 or 96? Don't quote me on that. But if they couldn't do it then, I don't think it's possible now.
Well, and I think whether they want to admit it or not, they live and die on transfer payments.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's where the Sovereignty Association comes in. We want to, we want to make our own little country and maybe our own little funny money, but we still want those Canadian dollars to keep coming through. You don't mind,
right.
do you?
And I would like a sovereignty disassociation, where Quebec can figure out how to get money from some other province than Alberta. Okay, so Red Eye Records gives us $2. Pierre Trudeau was Prime Minister in 1974 when and who destroyed the province's ability to borrow interest-free from the Bank of Canada for infrastructure and development. What is our debt now? Well, I can answer your last question. What is our debt now? $1,172,897,000,000. Oh my God. I can't even say all these numbers. 1,172,897,853,456,789,000 and change. My share, by the way, of the federal debt is $32,000. Our growth of debt per day is about $145 million per hour. It grows a little over $6 million per hour.
Sheila, next time you recite figures like that, if you don't mind, could you put your little pinky finger up to your lips just to get the full Dr. Evil effect, okay?
Yeah. And if anybody out there is interested, go to debtclock.ca. It's an initiative of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you want to know how screwed we are, just go there. And if you want your mood ruined, just go there for a second.
Sad.
It is sad. Okay, let's keep going. Mandy, 1971, woohoo. I will definitely go and see it when it comes back to Calgary. Yeah, it's
Great.
on June 29th. Canyon Meadows Cinema. I think it's 7:30, but if you go to Canyon Meadows cinemas.ca, you'll find the showtimes there. January 777, Sheila, the APP, the Alberta Prosperity Project, has all the answers to the concerns you mentioned regarding Alberta independence. Yes, I did see that. I think, though, my comments were more with regard to the separatist political parties. There's sort of a fracturing of those, and none of them have really done a good think on what they would do tangibly if Alberta voted to separate. And if you want people to buy your ideas, you kind of have to tell them what they are in advance.
Sheila, if Alberta were to separate and you form your own currency, whose face or what image goes on the $100 bill?
Ralph Klein, 100%.
Okay. All right. That's a no-brainer.
But I'm not gonna, we've talked about this before. I don't necessarily have to wait for Alberta to separate. I can just make my own micro-state. That crazy guy in Australia did it. He made a lot of money just having people come in, and he would stamp their passports, and then they would just go back out. They'd come onto his farm, go to the passport office, and he would charge to stamp their passport. Just they could have their passport stamped by I forget what it was called. Hutt River Principality. That's what it was. And they would have that stamp on their passport.
I fear for the future of that man, given the kind of leadership in Australia. I don't know how they're tolerating it.
He died. So I don't know what happened with his sheep farm that he was mad about, but he did pass away, sadly. I think that's everything. I have to go film the Ezra Levant show right away. So I think we're all wrapped up. Is that right, Olivia?
Yes, we are. Okay, well, speaking of Olivia, thanks to her and Efren and Danny behind the board there. And, of course, special thanks to Sheila Gunn-Reid, looking so dapper in that jacket. I really like it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, especially those who gave us some do-re-mi. It's how we pay the bills here. We don't do direct withdrawal from your paycheck like the mainstream media does. There'll be 2 new Rebels here tomorrow for the live stream starting at 12 noon Eastern. In the meantime, as always, folks, stay sane.
Mr. Speaker, we understand that passport renewal requests have greatly peaked since the end of travel restrictions, and so Passport Canada staff are working day and night relentlessly to deliver passports to Canadians. We understand that people are facing unacceptable delays. This is very difficult, but we will continue to work day and night to rectify the situation, and we will rectify it.